Hey kids, Russ Maines here from Cranial Media. That's me. So today's video lecture is about guns. This is a follow-up on our introduction for shock and awe. So today we're going to talk about guns. Now, when I talk about guns, or mention the word guns, a lot of people think of these idiots. That's right. Guns are very dangerous, especially in the hands of an idiot or somebody who has no respect for the living. So whenever you get involved with a gun, it doesn't make a difference if it's one of these.
All right, into the chamber, fans on. Grab it with my left hand here. I'll just aim for a tree or something. Probably gonna spiral off and miss, but we'll find out. Here we go. Oh, I got it! And I got the pond in several chunks. Well, we'll go check that out. Here's the tree. And there's where the potato headed. Just a glancing blow, but took off all the bark and even went down to the wood some.
Or one of these.
The PL-01 concept tank, developed by Obram, part of Poland Defence Holdings, with the cooperation of BAE Systems, was recently unveiled at the MSPO 2013 Defence Exhibition. The tank weighs 35 tons and is 7 meters long, 3.8 meters wide and 2.8 meters high, and is operated by a crew of 3 people. Using adaptive technology, the hexagonal Peltier plates on the surface can adjust temperature to ambient levels, rendering the tank invisible to infrared sensors. The tank also features 350 degrees observation capability during the day and night. Comprised of a chassis with an unmanned turret with an auto-loading 105mm or 120mm caliber cannon, the PL-01 is intended to act as a fire support combat vehicle. According to Poland Defence Holdings, the PL-01 is expected to begin production in 2018 and be ready for export in 2022.
Or one of these.
Stand by. But.
So probably the best clip out there that describes guns is the one that comes off of Mythbusters. Now this is from Jamie Heineman, his video on guns. Just take a minute and watch this video.
Hey Jamie, so I heard you had something really cool to show us.
I do. This thing, yeah. This is not a BB gun.
No, clearly not a BB gun, really big BBs.
Although it is an air gun, like BB guns or air guns, or like paintball guns, like airsoft. The thing is that this is a less than lethal law enforcement tool. It is a 6-shooter, and so it has 6 barrels in it, which you can see.
Wow.
And it will take anything like ping pong ball sized.
And it's something used like by law enforcement.
Yes, as a deterrent. They've, there are other, I mean, it's actually, I should make the point that this isn't by any means a toy. If you put something other than rubber balls in it, it could be actually quite the opposite. I've been long fascinated by pneumatic weapons, or we use pneumatic tools for all sorts of things. And there's something about just having a tank that will, release something and fire something instead of these brass cartridges and explosives and things like that. And the fact is that you can get darn near as much power out of something like this as you can out of a normal firearm.
Right.
And one of the things about the Eclipse, this is made by Eclipse Defense Technologies, and you can find them on eclipsedefense.com, I believe it is. But one of the bonuses about having a tank-fed projectile is that you can vary the amount of power that you put behind the projectile, the velocity.
In the stock right there, that's just a tank of compressed air.
Yeah, this is high pressure air. You could use CO2, but these are designed to work off of HP air, which is similar to what is recommended for most paintball guns. So it's something that is standard equipment, and that you just screw into the back. They're much quieter, and with this little dial here, you can set the velocity of the projectile. So that's where something that is less than lethal like this is important, because if you're further away, the projectile is going to be slower down. You need to set the setting higher if you're going to hit somebody and not actually hurt them.
And the government defines the less than lethal in terms of the impact force, the joules.
Yes. The amount of impact force is very specific. I think it's up to about 100 joules is the threshold of where potential lethality starts. And this thing is designed with the specific projectiles that are engineered to go in here to deliver less than that.
Right. The mass, the shape of the projectile, distance, and then how much pressure.
Yeah, the company even has stuff in the works where there's a laser rangefinder that goes on this. And so if you aim at somebody close by, the pressure will back off, so you're delivering exactly the maximum that you want to and no more. But then you can aim at somebody further away and it'll up the pressure to deliver that same impact to them. Wow. As opposed to, if you just you cranked it up and you hit somebody at close range, you might actually seriously hurt them. I would point out that, and this is maybe something we can cover at another time, there are air guns that people go big game hunting with, even. Wow. Like 50 caliber things that'll bring down a buffalo. So air is serious business.
Doesn't need to be combustion, it can be compressed air and be serious business.
Yeah. So right now I've got it on the low setting, firing in 3, 2, 1. Okay, and now I've got it on a medium setting. Okay, and now we're up to the high setting. Wow, that's poking that ball right through the sound blanket, and that's some serious business.
Jamie, that was pretty amazing. So basically, this looks like a dog toy. It's 22 grams. How did it feel shooting that at the high setting?
Well, it doesn't have any kickback. At the high setting, that puts out about 91 joules, which is just under lethal with one of these.
And that's calculated at the muzzle, meaning that if someone was standing pretty close to the gun, they wouldn't die.
Technically, they would not die.
I would not want to stand in front of that.
You would be very unhappy if you got hit with one of these at that close range. These are interesting to me because of the adjustability. If you were, say, in law enforcement and somebody is coming at you and you give them a bad bruise and they're still going, you can change the setting with a pistol or a firearm. You can't really do that, I mean, not unless you preload the gun with specific rounds or something, and they're made to penetrate anyway. And with something like this, with that kind of energy, where it's poking a hole through a blanket or something like that, it's you're going to think twice about continuing to advance on long.
And with different types of projectiles, different shapes, that provides a different type of impact.
Right. These things are a lot heavier. They're very significantly heavier, and this is something that you would want to use at a larger range. It's going to be more stable and more accurate, but it's also heavier, and again, they'll have a laser or a rangefinder built onto the gun as part of the thing in the works, to where you draw your target, you can deliver exactly, the gun will deliver exactly what kind of force that you decide you need in that particular case.
But something you might not want to put in that is something you were showing me earlier.
Oh yeah, this is these are actually from a coat rack. So yeah, it's like the perfect fit. And I figure, why wouldn't you use this if you're making a vampire movie? These things would have to stick in you. I mean, we just shot a dog toy completely through a wad of sound blankets. With something like this, if you're a vampire, you don't want to get hit by that.
Do not try this at home.
Firing in 3, 2, 1. I'm just saying, if you were a vampire, 6 of these going into you, you wouldn't be happy. It went in one side of the bucket, through the water, out the other side of the bucket, and put a dent in the wall over there. So that's, I dare say that Eclipse launcher guys didn't really have this in mind, but if I was going after vampires, I'd have one of these, I think.
Well, thanks for sharing with Jamie.
The bottom line is guns are dangerous and they should always be treated with a ton of respect. And what I mean by that is don't ever point the muzzle end of a gun at anybody or anything unless you want to destroy it. That's kind of the way you should treat guns. Now, so the truth is not all guns are the same. Tank guns, artillery guns, battle guns on Navy ships and stuff. They're not all the same. They're all kind of different. Some of them have barrels that have a rifling that twists the projectile as it goes down range. A lot of them, like your Abrams tank, the A1M2 tank, has a smoothbore gun. Matter of fact, Russian tanks have a rifled barrel. So really the choice of the gun is up to you. Now for shock physics, what we want to do is we want to use a smoothbore powder gun. Essentially, that's a gun that uses gunpowder. Okay, so it's a little bit of a misnomer when you hear Jamie say, well, the reason he likes those guns is you can vary the velocity of the projectile by how much gas you put into the gun. Well, to be honest, the same thing is true with powder guns. If you put in only so many grains of propellant, you're going to get some kind of velocity out. So this is really a really important concept about varying the amount of explosive gas that you have inside of the breech of the gun. The breech essentially is the place where all the energy comes from, whether it's an expanding gas from compressed air, whether it's a propellant type gun, or whether it's a gunpowder type gun. So it's really important to understand that when you have a gunpowder type gun, there are all kinds of gunpowders out there. Some gunpowders use a spherical gunpowder. Some of them use a cylindrical type gunpowder that actually has little perforations in it, 5 or 7 perforations. And each gunpowder performs differently. But to be honest, usually the maximum velocity that you can get out of a projectile is about 2.5 kilometers per second before the pressure gets so huge inside of the breech that you're going to blow the gun up. That's why they're dangerous. People have overloaded powder guns before and have destroyed them and have injured themselves. So, what you want to do is you want to choose the right type of gunpowder that has kind of a long duration burn, so that way, it's an easy acceleration downrange. And you also want to make sure that all the gun propellant is burnt by the time the projectile goes downrange. So you have to play a balancing act. That's why most of the labs where I have worked or know people who work in them will use either a combination of different gunpowders to kind of tailor the acceleration of the projectile, or what they'll do is they'll blend gunpowders together, or so-called mixed gunpowders. So let's go back to our experiment again. Let's say you have an unknown gunpowder, And you want to know how fast that projectile can go downrange. But we don't know exactly what happens in between, between 0 and, let's say, 2.5 kilometers per second. So what you want to do is you want to make your gunpowder or whatever, and you want to develop this projectile curve or performance curve. So what folks typically do is they take the ratio of the projectile and then they will divide that by the mass of the gunpowder. It's called the P to M ratio. Now the P to M ratio is on the axis of the horizontal axis. That's what you do with that information. And then what you do is you plot the result velocity on the vertical axis. So now you have velocity versus P to M ratio, right? That will give you a performance curve. Here's an example of what that performance curve could look like. Now bear in mind that this information is purely hypothetical. This is not a real performance curve. I just threw some numbers in there because they looked right. Our gunpowder, notional gunpowder, performs on a power curve. So essentially x to some power gives you the velocity, right? Okay. So you got that, but take a look at the information in the far right-hand column. You know, the breech pressure goes up quite a bit whenever you start putting in even tiny amounts of gunpowder. That's because the rate of the burn of a gunpowder is based on pressure. So the more pressure you have, the faster the burn goes. The faster the burn goes, the more pressure you have. So it's kind of a balancing act, and you want to make sure whatever gunpowder you use, you don't exceed the material properties or the material strength of the breech. That's very important. People will blow themselves up because they put in too many grams of gunpowder. It doesn't take much after a while before you start reaching that threshold where you're going to do a lot of damage. So again, I caution you when you use gunpowder to take your time, think about what you're doing. Now, you're going to ask me a question, right? How do I measure the velocity of the projectile? Well, we're going to talk about that some other day. But for now, let's just make the assumption that we know how to actually measure the projectile velocity and we have this curve. Well, great, we did all this work. So what? Why do we need it? Well, the bottom line is you need this performance curve in order to understand what the impact conditions are going to be at the muzzle of the gun. Okay? And you know, because you've read Jerry Forbes's book, that the free surface velocity is equal to 1/2 of the impact velocity. So what that means is by the time you're done, you actually know what the free surface velocity is of the target before you even do your experiment. So that means you can go in and predict what the particle velocity ought to be. That being said, it's only half of the information that you actually need to determine the stress in the material. You actually need the shock wave velocity too. And you can only get that through doing experiments. And again, we'll cover that at some other time. But for now, we have a performance curve.